land expropriation without compensation, we will have to go a few rounds before there is clarity for all concerned. It is important from the outset to stress that the Cape Chamber of Commerce and Industry is an organisation that since inception 214 years ago is completely apolitical, or differently put, politically neutral. We religiously guard this status, especially the fact that it gives us gravitas and allows us to deal with various sectors of society. Politics, as you know, is often the case, impacts on our economy either positively or negatively. And that is where the Cape Chamber of Commerce and Industry has an immense responsibility to play a leading role as the voice of business. It's very important to stress for the non-members present here today to take cognizance of the fact that as the Cape Chamber of Commerce and Industry, we represent all races and all sectors of society when it comes to business. As the Chamber of Commerce and Industry, we believe that it is paramount that we consider all aspects, interpretations and views of an issue. That is the main reason for this evening. I've heard that it's said about our event this evening that some people are losing their marbles when it comes to expropriation of land without compensation. I've also heard that it is said that some will be left with nothing but chicken feet after the land expropriation without compensation. Ladies and gentlemen, land expropriation without compensation, the phrase itself conveys to many the fact that something that is owned by one person will be unceremoniously taken away and given to another. For many, land expropriation without compensation can be interpreted as an inflammatory turn of phrase. I would even be as bold to say that I don't think two people in this room this evening will have exactly the same idea of what it actually means, or when it will really happen, and if and when land expropriation without compensation is implemented. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why we are having this evening, so that we can move from having an opinion to actually taking a stance. And for us to take a stand, as the saying goes, you either take a stand for something or you fall for everything. The World Bank, as you know, has observed that South Africa's historical, highly skewed distribution of land and productive asset is a source of inequality and social fragility. The President, Cyril Ramaphosa, has himself reiterated that expropriation of land without compensation will be done in an orderly manner. In his own words, he has said, "We will seek to ensure, as we did in 1994 when we crafted our constitution, that we take into account the interests of all our people of our beloved land. That we take into account the interests of all our people." Tonight, we have a smaller task. We need only take into account the interests, or differently put, the views of two people as a start. I fully appreciate that our two heavyweight debate champions may represent views contrary to yours. But, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to ask you that we have a healthy, robust, yet respectful conversation this evening, so that we may move towards a sustainable solution to what is a very complex issue affecting all of us in South Africa. Our heavyweight debate champions this evening are, and I'd firstly like to start with who is affectionately known as Comrade Andile Mngxitama. I practiced this all afternoon. The founder of and leader of Black First, Land First, or the BLF. The BLF was founded by Andile in 2015, following his exit from the EFF. He was born and raised by a farm worker and a domestic worker on the farms in Potchefstroom in the Northwest Province, and I understand he also speaks Afrikaans. He very impressively holds a master's degree in sociology from the University of Witwatersrand and writes in both genres of fiction and non-fiction. His broad political knowledge and powerful oratory skills, which we will see, are used to examine and highlight the challenges many black people have. Facing Andile will be Dawie Roodt on my left, the chief economist of the Efficient Group. He is a nationally renowned economist who specializes in government, fiscal and monetary policy. Dawie is frequently quoted and participates in media coverage of the economic and financial matters. He also lectures on the subject at leading university and holds a master's degree in economics, which he obtained cum laude. Dawie also was afforded the status of Economist of the Year. Ladies and gentlemen, the two heavyweights I have just mentioned undoubtedly will have separate points of view. But just for tonight, I want to ask you to consider that your point of view you regard may not necessarily be the only and absolute truth there is. We often feel that our perspective is right, and that if everyone just understood the situation as we did, they would have the same point of view as we have. Unfortunately, the world doesn't work like that, ladies and gentlemen, and after this evening, you may very well hold a stronger view of your very own view that you had, or you could have changed your view. But that is entirely up to you. I trust you will find this evening, if not only enjoyable, but also insightful, and I'd like to hand over to Sid for the rest of the evening. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, everybody looks very expectant. Yeah, your next task is to tuck into your starter if you haven't done so already. Then we'll serve the main course shortly, and then after that I will outline the terms of engagement and all the rules, of which there are a number, and we can then carry on with the debate. So I'll see you in about half an hour to 40 minutes. Thank you very much. Folks have had requests for Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi is Togosan, and the password is Togosan1 with both the O's being zeros. So it's TS0G0SUN1 is the password. And the hashtag is hashtag Rumble2018. Hashtag Rumble2018. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are ready to rumble. Our two heavy debate contestants, Mr. Dawie Roodt from the Efficient Group versus Comrade Andile Mngxitama from the BLF. Thank you, that wasn't easy. Okay, without further ado, we're running about 10 minutes late. Let me just fill you in on the procedure. First to speak will be Dawie for 20 minutes, followed by Dawie will be Andile for 20 minutes. Then Dawie will respond for 5 minutes and Andile will respond for 5 minutes. And then we'll have a Q&A. We've got a roving mic for the audience. If I could just ask you for the Q&A, if you do have a question is a very short statement followed by the question. For example, I'm 5'10", do you think I'll be a good basketball player? Right, a statement followed by a question, and if you can please keep it quite brief. Also, ladies and gentlemen, what you will hear will be very different views, and I would like there to be a semblance of order. We do have security here, so you will be ejected. You can shout and cheer, I suppose, but this isn't WWE. This is the rumble in the urban jungle. And please, so if you feel that you are very upset and you need to depart, if you could please do so quietly and in an orderly manner, so as not to upset the rest of the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let me ask our first speaker to come up, Mr. Dawie Roodt.
Thank you, Sid. Thank you for the invitation from the Cape Chamber. Good evening to all the Cape Townians. En 'n spesiale goeienaand aan my goeie vriend Andile. Dis lekker om jou vanaand hier te hê, lekker om jou te ontmoet. And of course my beautiful wife that also joined me. Thank you for that. All right, where's my story going to start? First of all, I think I want to say a few things about this thing that we call a state. What is a state? What is a government? And a government is actually nothing, or a state is actually nothing. It's the only thing that a state is an agreement between individuals. We agree that we will form a state, that we will form a government. And we have certain agreements, and we agree, for example, that we will give away our rights to violence to this thing that we call the state. And the state essentially is nothing but the monopolization of violence. And we agree that the state will monopolize violence, and they will look after us, after the people of the country, and they will look after our stuff. And for that, we will fund them, we will give them money, and we will pay our taxes. And when a state becomes a predatory state and starts stealing our stuff, they lose their legitimacy, and we must ask the question on whether we want to keep on funding the state. The second point is that this debate tonight is not about land, this debate tonight is about private property rights. So when there's a change to the Constitution, the way that it is suggested, all private property rights can potentially be stolen or expropriated. Let me tell you our story. Our story, quite incidentally, quite interesting, starts not too far from here. It starts in a cave in a small town in the Southern Cape called Blombos. And in this cave, 100,000 years ago, we became human. The oldest science of human abstract thinking was discovered in the Southern Cape. So we all actually started here in the Southern Cape 100,000 years ago. Life was very, very tough. And we had an amazing journey as Homo sapiens. We moved up into the rest of Africa. We colonized the rest of Africa. They moved, a relatively small group of us moved out of Africa about 60,000 years ago, and we colonized the rest of the world. The only guys that stayed behind were the Sun. They stayed behind in this part of the world called Southern Africa. And approximately 2,000 years ago, a group came from the north. They called the Khoi. They had certain technology, they had animals, they could produce a big surplus, they could support bigger groups, and they simply start pushing out the sun out of Southern Africa. and they assimilated and they colonized the San in Southern Africa, large parts of that. And approximately 1,000 years ago, another group came from Central Africa called the Bantu. They moved into Southern Africa and they had even better technology. They had iron, they had grass called the different grains, they had animals, they could produce a massive surplus, they could actually afford it to maintain big armies, and they also colonized big chunks of Southern Africa, especially the eastern part of Southern Africa moving down. Approximately 600 years ago, another group came from Europe, and they started in the southern tip of South Africa, here where we are today, and they started moving north, and initially they colonized most of the western and the southern part of South Africa. And they came across the group coming from the north, the Bantu at the Fish River, and that is when the groups first met. Then a group, relatively smallish group of Europeans started moving north. Remember, in the meantime, there was a lot of conflict in Southern Africa. People killed each other, especially a very successful military leader with the name of Shaka. He scattered many tribes in the internal part of South Africa, and he emptied large chunks of Southern Africa as well in this whole process. Another group of Europeans from southern tip of Africa started moving north, and they conquered and they colonized just about all of what we call today South Africa. And approximately 100 years ago, the most successful and the greatest empire that we've probably ever witnessed, the British Empire, they started exactly the same process, moving north and conquered and colonized the rest of Africa and the rest of South Africa, for that matter. Well, that's roughly 100 years ago. I just want to touch a little bit on the history of the world 100 years ago. 100 years ago, absolute poverty was more than 90%. More than 90% of the world's population lived in absolute poverty. Today, it is less than 10%. 100 years ago, life expectancy in Europe was about 45 years. Today, it is double that. We have done something right. We have, the past 100 years, created so much wealth, and we've created such amazing things, more than all the centuries before that. And today, within 10 or 20 years, we will not have absolute poverty in the world anymore. Why has that happened? It has happened because of the protection of private property rights. It has happened because we protected individual rights. It has happened because of constitutionalism and democracy, and it has happened because of the amazing powers of the free market. South Africa also benefited from that in many ways. And South Africa, despite this horrible racial history that we have in South Africa also made some progress, especially since 1994. But the past 10 years, we have seen the forces of the most destructive economic force in South Africa ever, especially under Jacob Zuma. And I can go through all the numbers. Jacob Zuma destroyed, he gutted our state-owned enterprises. Jacob Zuma forced the fiscus in South Africa into a debt trap where we are today. It is basically impossible for us to get out of this debt trap. If the state doesn't start cutting back on state spending dramatically, we will be downgraded very soon. That will lead to a further weakening in the currency. It will lead to higher interest rates and even weaker economic growth. It will lead to an increase in unemployment and a further increase in poverty. And every month when I get the new data about unemployment and poverty, I cry, because it is caused by the most destructive ANC forces and government that the South African economy has ever witnessed. And what I am concerned about is because they are starting to panic. They realize that they are ideologically confused, and they start doing all sort of silly things, like calling for the expropriation of private property, and in the process they will destroy the legitimacy of the state as well. I'm afraid economic growth this year is probably going to be about 0.5%. We will be lucky if we see better economic growth next year, the South African economy, and we are in very, very deep trouble. That's where we found ourselves today. But how should we address the land issue? How should we address the issue called the land problem? The answer to that is actually quite easy and simple. Remember, the function and the role of the state is to protect private property rights, to protect individuals and to protect private property rights. And that is exactly what the state is supposed to be doing. They must indeed give property, all kinds of property, back to its rightful owners. The rightful owners are not the blacks or the original people or the indigenous people. The rightful owners are people that can reasonably prove that they are the rightful owners or descendants of the rightful owners. It does not make sense to take land from private individuals and for the state to keep it and telling us that the state is keeping it for us. Because if something belongs to everybody, it belongs to nobody. Certainly, the state needs to keep on doing what they have been doing. They're supposed to redistribute, take from the give and give, take from the rich and give to the poor. The fiscus in South Africa is the most redistributive fiscus in the world. Keep on doing that, but for that we need a productive sector to be able to create wealth. A fallacy about land. Land is worth absolutely nothing. If you look at a piece of land 100 years ago and you look at a piece of land today, the production on a piece of land is multiples of what it was 100 years ago. In some instances, it is the land produces more than 100 times more today than what it produced 100 years ago. Why is that? It is exactly the same piece of land. Why is land producing so much more today than, say, 100 years ago? And the answer to that is very simple and very easy to understand, because the production is not really happening. The value add is not really happening on land. It is happening somewhere else. It happens because you add capital to land. It is happening because you add skills and know-how to this mixture called agriculture. And it is happening because we add something called technology to this mixture called land. And in the process, we have this massive increase in production. And if you want to be involved in agriculture today, as an example, you can do all sorts of things to get involved in agriculture. You can become a geneticist. You can become a financial engineer. You can be in personnel. You can be an electrician, anything. Because agriculture is changing. Like all other industries in the world, agriculture is also becoming a service industry. It's becoming part of the tertiary industry. It's becoming more and more digitized. And the real value add in land does not happen on the land anymore. It happens at universities, and it happens in labs where geneticists do all sort of amazing things. And in the process, adding value to what land can, how much value can be created with land. The real answer really is in fact not land. The real answer certainly is things that we all know: the protection of private property rights, individual rights. Those things we certainly do understand, and we know that. And there's a lot of proof globally on these sort of things. But the actual and the real answer is what we need in South Africa is to start where it really matters. And this is a national emergency. The quality of South Africa's skills development is not only bad, it is of the worst in the world. And it is our poor people that suffer because of this. And if we want South Africa to be prosperous, if we want South Africa to become rich and wealthy and successful and to live in peace, we need to do what we need to do, and that is to start at the most important place and to make sure that we create a world-class skills development system, a world-class education system, because without that, we will not be part of the modern world economy. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Dawie, thank you very much. Andile, I see you chomping at the bit to get up here, so the stage is all yours.
Normally when we start, we make some slogans such as one settler, one bullet, you know, the land belongs to us, you know, that type of thing. But I'm not going to do that. let me start by thanking the Chamber of Commerce for inviting me. I really don't know what got into the Chamber of Commerce, the Cape, invite me to speak to this audience. And also to thank Jennifer, the Secretary. She has been very kind. At one point, I saw an email that referred to me as comrade, you know, with the letterhead of the Cape Chamber of Commerce, Comrade Mngxitama, you know. So I was like, this is kind, okay? It is very unusual for Black First, Land First to be invited and to debate our primary enemy. White monopoly capital, which is what this chamber and all other chambers represent. And please, white monopoly capital is not the creation of some British PR firm. In fact, since 1962, the Communist Party of South Africa with Joe Slovo, the big intellectual that those of you who went to Wits and UCT and Rhodes have read about, was part of the people who coined the term white monopoly capital to describe the South African ruling class. So it is not this British. So for us, this is talking to almost like walking into enemy territory. I earlier on took some pictures, and I'm still traumatized by this experience, you know. So I'm standing there before this. I hope you know you understand my difficulty. I also went to the website, the Facebook of the chamber, and I saw somebody warning Dr. Dawie Roodt that he must bring his bodyguards tonight. Of course, earlier on in this week, we were in Parliament. Is it last week? We were in Parliament, right? And there was the Oppenheimers. You know, the real dynasty of South African capital. And we had a very friendly engagement with Nikki and Jonathan, you know. So we were surprised when people are losing their heads that you have invited us to speak here. I also want to acknowledge quickly the presence of the provincial leadership of our movement. Let me be clear from the onset that I do not believe in dialogue with those who have taken our land. We move from the honest recognition that there is an irreconcilable point of departure between the oppressor and the oppressed. We can't reconcile these points of departure between the landless and those who stole their land, between the colonizer and the native. And to bring it closer to home, we as Black First, Land First do not believe that there's an ethical, dialogical exchange between whites and blacks. Because there is a prior problem of what separates us, which has not been addressed. Therefore, when we enter into a dialogue, it's a false dialogue. Because it is not a dialogue of equals. You still have our stuff. Huh? And how can you, let's think about it a little bit. So a guy steals your car and then you meet them in the street. You must disregard the fact that the guy's got your car. Now you must have some kind of a dialogue. Even dialoguing over the car is unethical. The person must give you back the car. And then you can enter into an ethical engagement. See, Nelson Mandela, when he was talking to white people here, he was trying to do something now I recognize as important. He only made it possible for us as black people to be able to control the army, to control the police, to control the intelligence. In fact, I think soon we'll be able to control the judiciary as well. And you will realize soon why that is important. I was one of those young people who said Mandela is a sellout. But I see now that maybe the deal, was bad because it prolongs the revolutionary process. But now, the state is by and large, at least those elements of repressive elements of the state. What does that mean? It means, and I'll talk about the inevitable civil war, which must resolve the historical question. When that happens, a large chunk of the state will not be as repressive as the white state would have been. So that is, I think, the gift of Nelson Mandela to us. I will jump this stuff on decolonization and Fanon and so on. I want to say that I am not here to be understood. I don't want to be understood. It will be to ask too much from white people to understand me. Because if you understand me, you will then have to commit class suicide. Obliterate your position in this society as owners of the means of production. That's an impossibility. It cannot happen. So I'm not here to be understood. I'm here to simply tell you this, that there's a group of black people in this country who do not accept the deal which is continuing up to now. We are here to take back that which belongs to us. In fact, we must start with Nando's. You know, I was thinking about Nando's. So Nando's sells chicken, right? So where is this chicken raised from? From whose land? Our land. So we take the land and we take the chicken as well. And I mean, as I said, no, we don't want the chicken feet. The problem of the chicken feet is that right now we eat the chicken feet. So there is no, you see, black people are in a perpetual state of crisis. So this idea that you do land redistribution, there'll be trouble. No, we are in trouble now. So the economic armageddon that you have, you must be scared. I mean, if I was white and I was part of capital, I would be. Because it means that the reconfiguration in a much more radical sense of my state of being. Let's talk about the land question. Whose land? No, the land belongs to black people, African people. And these African people include the Khoi and the San. In fact, let me make it clear that this, what I call Mampur colonial historiography. You know Mampur, the Buddha drinking Mampur. It's Mampur colonial historiography that tried to separate the Khoi and the San from the African. It's just nonsense. It's apartheid nonsense. The Khoi and the San are African just like I am. In fact, I am Khoi San. Look at my nose. Try to pronounce my surname. So there is this separation. It's the nonsense of AfriForum, which ran away from us, by the way. We were invited with AfriForum, supposed to be here. AfriForum is going to be there on Twitter insulting us tonight, as they always do. But when it comes to debaters, they run away. But they have the money, of course, because they're part of the land thieves. AfriForum comes to the Western Cape, give money to some of our people here, call them kings of the Khoi and the San, and say the Xhosa and the Nguni have stolen your land. And then they go to speak to the king of the Zulu people, King Goodwill Zwelithini, and say to him, oh, we can help you. King Goodwill Zwelithini is Nguni. When they speak amongst the people here, the Khoi and the San, they say the Nguni stole your land and they involve in genocide. When they go there to speak to the king, our king, they say to the king, we will help you against land expropriation without compensation. So we know this is the old story of dividing and ruling us. I'm very happy to say that the king has not accepted this proposition that they did together with the Boer. They must stop land expropriation without compensation. The stupid proposition is Julius Malema, Motlanthe, and Cyril Ramaphosa, who are saying they want expropriation of land of black people. They want to expropriate the land of the king. No, land expropriation is about taking land from white people, giving it to black people. Not taking the land of black people. Absolutely. Now, the land was stolen from us through various means, but particularly because of the superiority of the arms of the invading colonizer. There can be no valid treaty agreement between the oppressor and the oppressed. All those documents that sometimes referred to by historians are documents of the oppressor. Whites in South Africa have no land rights. Their right to land emanates from conquest. And I mean, I accept this proposition. That the land that white people have and the property, and I don't make that distinction, is property that gained out of conquest. Now, of course, what that means is simply this. If we want our land back, then it means we must engage in a process of reconquest. You're not going to give us that land. We fought for it, you bled for it. That is why the idea that land has got no value doesn't make sense. White people killed us to get this land, and they were prepared to die for the land. If we want land, of course, it simply means we must be equally prepared to do so. That's why we say land or death. Whose death? Whose death? I could go on a little bit about, let me just say this. In Africa, we have an African saying in all our languages almost. It says, in other words, a debt does not decay because of time. There's historical debt of land dispossession. That is not going to now all of a sudden, somehow miraculously because of time, because land thieves are selling each other stolen property. Somehow this become legitimized into legitimate position. No. I want to move now on just one. What is the impact of land dispossession? From land ownership emanates the control of the means of production. The entire economy is based precisely on this. You can't jump steps, Dr. Roodt. You can't jump to technology, education, and so on. You start from the original position. Go to Taiwan. Go to Japan. Go to South Korea. Go to China. The successful models of, if you like, industrialization and technological development. Japan, in particular, 1945, radical land redistribution kickstarted the accumulation process on a much more equitable basis. This is true for China. You here say, no, don't do that. Jump to technology and skills. I know a lot of black people who have degrees from even these prestigious universities can't get jobs because we have not addressed the original question. Let me just give you this a statistic, for instance, quickly. But the point is this: land ownership gives you control of the economy, and I want to argue also control over the state itself. And we will debate about the state because we have different notion of the state. Importantly, from land ownership emerges identities. And this is an important point for me. Whites are united by a common thread which links them back to land theft. And it's an irrational bond that comes from this. Let me give you some facts and show you this bond. South Africa is a country of about 123 million hectares. We have about 58 or 56 million people. Whites constitute about 4.5 million people in South Africa. But here is the fact. Only 35,000 white people own 80% of the land. That's not even, can't fill up a stadium. You know, all black political parties, they fill up stadiums, you know, regularly, right? So, if we took all the white people who own this, about 8% of the land, they will not fill up a stadium. But I said this white people is 4.5 million people. So the majority of white people actually do not have land. So this idea that they are the defense force of white monopoly capital, the elite, white class, is irrational. A rational proposition would have meant the white working class, the white poor join together with black people and actually dispossess the white elite. So the land question is not an economic question. It's a question about who are you. And that's why white people, the white working class, is prepared to defend its ruling class, its proper ruling class, its actual economic enemies. Let me just continue and show you this. South Africa is a semi-arid country. We know this. I hope we know that. Only 20% of South Africa is highly productive in terms of fertile, in terms of agricultural produce. And of this 20%, it's very important, this statistic, is owned by about 7,000 white families and about 6-7 conglomerates, agricultural conglomerates. And from this 20% of the land, 80% of the agricultural produce come from this piece of land, owned by about 7,000 only. So it's a highly concentrated ownership structure of the economy, of the agricultural economy. So the point I'm making is the majority of white people should not be opposing white redistribution of land. But of course they do. The point is the land ownership in South Africa explains a lot of things, but I'll jump. Let me come to land expropriation. We believe in land expropriation without compensation, and on two grounds. The first ground is the historical one, the historical redress. We said land is stolen. Land was taken, land must be redressed, must be returned. What you're going to do with the land is a secondary question. So the first premise is land expropriation without compensation because land was taken, therefore land must be returned. But there is also a second premise, which is important, and it's an economic one, interestingly. A fair redistribution of land is good for the economy, for economic development. In South Africa, if we were to look at just two sectors, agricultural and mining, argue that, in fact, because of the inefficiency of those sectors, even if, say, there was no land question of the historical land theft, you will still have to radically redistribute those sectors. Take mining. Mining in South Africa, we know that we about the value of mining in South Africa about 20 trillion rand. I mean, in terms of the known mineral resources, 20 trillion. So we're almost one of the top 5, probably if not top 3 of the world in terms of known minerals on earth. 80% of platinum is in this country. But mining gives us only about 400,000 jobs. I'm saying to you, that is highly inefficient. Only for that reason, you should be redistributing that economic sector. Take agriculture, right? It doesn't produce more than, I think, 700,000 jobs, bad jobs. And then on top of that, you are, the white farmers are killing us, black people. I don't know if white people eat pap, but we eat maize, pap, and 90% of this pap is GMO. Nowhere on earth do you feed people genetically modified food, at least maize. You go to Europe, they have outlawed this. China, Russia, people who care, they don't do this, care for their people. So for these 2 reasons, both historical redress and even for economic reasons, you will actually do land expropriation without compensation. Now, of course, there's a problem. In the first phase of once you expropriate, there's going to be a deepening of a crisis. That's what Zimbabwe is going through. Zimbabwe is going through a serious crisis. And that crisis is not just because Zimbabwe redistributed land, it's because there's external factors. The attack of the Zimbabwean economy is an imperialist attack on that economy. Because, of course, they touch white interests. But Zimbabwe is 300 years ahead of black South Africans. Because Zimbabweans are not tenants in Zimbabwe, they own Zimbabwe. We black people in this country are tenants, you are landlords. So we have not begun. So we are already in an ongoing recession as black people, not because there is a revolutionary crisis which is addressing a problem. We just in this permanent state of exclusion because that's how the structure of this economy is like. So Zimbabwe is 300 years, black Zimbabweans are 300 years ahead of us, black South Africans. We don't own this country. We are all foreigners, black people in this country. Now, the current racist land ownership pattern in South Africa and the colonial economic structure is even bad for the bourgeois economy. I mean, I think we can argue that. Precisely for these arguments I'm making about both the agricultural sector and mining. And we know that in agriculture, part of the recession, the technical recession, which is just affecting white people, because we have always been in recession, it is caused by the agricultural sector's economic terrorism because they are not producing as part of trying to pressurize government to stay away from this land expropriation question. Let's talk about the inevitable. Let me give you, I'm going to give you now in conclusion, I'm going to give you firstly the bad news and then I'm going to give you the good news. The bad news for you is that, and I believe this, that a land war is inevitable in South Africa. The manipulation of the national discourse by the ruling class through the ownership of the media, your capacity to be able to say who is corrupt, using proxies to purge your opponents, including Zuma, using Julius Malema and others to get rid of Zuma. The capturing of the ANC under Ramaphosa by white monopoly capital. The open bias of the judiciary. The white arrogance of forces such as AfriForum and the Oppenheimer family and the Rupert family. The deepening poverty, alienation of black people. These are the building blocks towards this Armageddon, which will happen. When the Guptas landed at Waterkloof military base, there was so much noise and well-funded campaigns that ended up getting rid of Zuma. The banks of the Guptas were shut down and they were chased out of the country. You all call that state capture and corruption. You're all correctly very unhappy. But let me give you an interesting scenario. The Oppenheimer family, both Nikki and Jonathan Oppenheimer, goes to the head office of the ANC and demand that the ANC, not government, the ANC, give them an international airport of their own. Let me repeat that. We were angry, correctly so, when the Guptas landed at Waterkloof. Landed. Here the Oppenheimers go to the ANC, demands an international airport inside an international airport. And the ANC gives them this international airport inside an international airport. And that is okay. The Oppenheimers who are involved in diamond trading. So what is happening here? They fly to Kimberley, take our diamonds, fly to the international airport, out of the country, go somewhere else, get guns and other things, fly back into their own private international airport, and so on. It goes on. The point is, the sense of outrage by people who are anti-corruption is biased, and it is influenced by who is on the other side. Gweda Mantashe wrote a letter to say to Nikki and them, yeah, you have the international airport now. Our court, including the Constitutional Court, doesn't see anything wrong with this. I don't have to tell you that the Oppenheimers, through the DBS process, don't pay tax for uncut diamonds, exporting them. I'm sure you know that. They were called in Parliament in 2007. They could not produce the agreement that they said that exclusion or that exemption was based on. And the media dropped that question because, you see, corruption is when you are not white. Let me now give you the good news. I'm saying this, the bad news is there's going to be a war for land. And this war for land is not just the physical question of land, but it is our sense of exclusion in our own country in every area of life. How are you going to solve that? We are sufficiently angry, and I have seen enough people who are ready to actually do what is the ultimate sacrifice to solve this problem for their children and for the future. So I'm confident that that war is coming. Here is the good news for you. The good news is that there's not going to be any land expropriation without compensation. There's not going to be amendment of the Constitution. White capital has done a good job with Julius Malema and Cyril Ramaphosa. They are highly compromised. There is no way Ramaphosa is going to go and expropriate land without compensation. We saw what happened in Marikana together with Lonmin. He protected Lonmin's interest to the point of actually engineering a massacre. Julius Malema himself, he makes enough noise, and some of you get terrified, white monopoly capital, and then you make that a call during the middle of the night, and then of course you deliver some things to him, and then of course the whole thing goes away. So no, the good news is, at least in the medium term, short medium term, there's not going to be land expropriation without compensation. I mean, I can go into why. I mean, if you look at the parliamentary process, you know that there have been hearings, and you know that there's a report that will only come at the end of this month. There's no way that they're going to be able to bring a bill, even if they wanted, because bring a bill takes about 410 days just to introduce the bill. If they wanted to expropriate land without compensation, they would have used an instrument which is available to them already, because President Zuma did not sign the expropriation bill. So all they needed to do in February this year was to say, we agree we're going to now amend the Constitution, and then go to the expropriation bill, which has been rejected by Zuma, and draft it so that already it fast-tracked the process of land expropriation without compensation. So in the medium term, no, don't worry. These guys are just using the land expropriation discourse to get votes from black people next year. It is about elections next year. It's not about expropriating you. So what about those of us who do want to expropriate you? You see, we are not going to take your money. We are not going to take your calls. We are organizing ourselves. You already know, I'm sure some of you, that Johan Rupert has got 10 interdicts against our movement. He had to go to court because we have identified 10 farms of his, and we have organized people to go to take these farms. And he ran to the High Court. But you see, Johan Rupert's problem is this, and there's a problem of white people. He's got too many farms. So he's got interdict against us on 10 farms. Okay, we say, good, Johan Rupert. Those 10 farms, maybe we'll not take them now. What about the 100 others? So here is what's going to happen. We are clear that both the EFF and ANC will not amend the constitution before the 2019 elections. We as Black First Land shall simply lead a process of a people's-led land expropriation. We are already identifying farms, we are identifying houses as well. I think this process is difficult, but I don't think it can be easily stopped. And I can tell you now, I mean, if I were to be an informant just for a little while, we do take houses in white suburbs. And often when that happens, they call the police. But the police who arrive are black people. And so we start speaking in Xhosa or in Zulu or in Sepedi or any of our African languages. We say, but this house has been standing here with no one for the past 3 years. So what is the problem? These white people are overhoused. We have no houses. And so the police drive away. So now what you must do, you must go to court. Yes, we will go to court on the 19th. The High Court will probably evict us. But what the truth is, we already have identified other 20 houses. So I'm talking about property in the urban white settlements. Brooklyn. Places like this. And on farms, we're doing the same. We're identifying. So I'm saying to you here, you will not be able to buy off the black legitimate rage that can only be addressed by addressing the historical question. But this burden of addressing this historical question, I don't think it is yours. I can't ask you to do so. If I was white, male, capitalist, in fact, I will speak like Professor maybe Dawie Roodt, but also I will think that somebody who speaks like me is crazy. Because you will now go to speak to government, you'll meet government, and government will assure you that there's law and order, there's all these things. But I'm saying to you, that law and order, the Mandela consensus, is no longer sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I suppose that excludes me because I rent. Okay, we're going on to our second round now. So, Dawie, if you can come up and respond for 5 minutes. After your 5 minutes, if you could take a seat on the chair. And once Davie's finished, Andile, if you could come up and then do your 5 minutes and then stay on stage for the Q&A. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm really having difficulty to think how to pitch this. All right. First of all, Andile, I don't think you speak for black people in South Africa. You seem to you think you're speaking for black people in South Africa. I don't believe that. And yes, you might have the right on your own interpretation of facts, but you don't have the right on manipulating the facts. In fact, this is proper research, and I can give you I intentionally trying to stay away from the numbers because now it's going to be you say this, I said that sort of thing. But I can tell you is that fewer than 5% of so-called black people in South Africa consider land as the most important issue. The most important issue by the most people in South Africa is unemployment. That's the issue. We want jobs. We want to grow the economy in order to grow, in order to alleviate poverty in South Africa. If you also make use of examples like, for example, Zimbabwe are 300 years ahead of us. Wow, my goodness gracious! Zimbabwe is going to need assistance from the rest of the world, because if they don't get assistance from the rest of the world, people are literally going to die of hunger in Zimbabwe. if you use for examples going to many countries, you've mentioned countries like, for example, Japan and places like that. People don't even, if they inherit a farm in Japan, they don't even go and claim the farm because that's not where wealth creation happens in a modern economy. Wealth creation happens somewhere else. People do not want farms. People want to stay in cities where they can have proper and decent jobs. And you can only get that from nowhere in the world. Nowhere in the world. We're not going to break the agricultural land into millions of small pieces and settle millions of small farmers in South Africa. Nowhere in the world are farms getting smaller. Everywhere in the world, farms are getting bigger. Nowhere in the world are farms employing more people. Everywhere in the world, farms are employing fewer people. And of course, if you mention how many farms are owned by blacks and how many farms are owned by blacks, whites and all that, your stats are simply incorrect. And in fact, the black middle class in South Africa are significantly bigger than the so-called white middle class in South Africa today. Blacks, the progress that was made by blacks the past 25 years in South Africa is absolutely astonishing. If it hasn't been for the destructive government of the ANC government, especially under Zuma, where the blacks and all South Africans would have been much better off today. But my main issue is, and let me speak from my heart now, what I really want. And that is, I want South Africa to be a successful country. I want South Africa to be an efficient country that creates wealth for all South Africans. And it's going to be difficult and it's going to be tough because we've lost a long, long time. And if we cannot talk to each other, and if we cannot debate things, and if we can't agree on some stats somehow, which is the truth, and if we don't share the common vision of a successful South Africa for all South Africans, then I'm afraid this is going to be a very dark future for all South Africans. Thank you.
No, it's all right. It's all right. See, there is a thing called, don't tell me 5 minutes, I'll speak for 10, for 20 if I want to. There is a thing called white arrogance. White arrogance. And the idea that black people are children. And the idea that white people are producers of knowledge. And the idea that you can, because you know black people, my men say, I can my men say. So my men say, you cannot speak for my men say. I mean, this white man, that arrogance, he stands here and says, I can't speak for black people. Yeah, I mean, and all these white people believe that, but this is the love, you see. Let's not be nasty towards each other, man, because there's a war. The war will resolve the problem. It's coming. But the idea that white people can today actually stand up and dictate what black people think is a shocking proposition, but it shows that what economic power can give you. It can give you the urge to manipulate knowledge, statistics, to erase black voices, black truth, black perspectives. You know, my movement is one of the poorest movements. Last week we started asking people to give us money, black people, poor black people. Yes, we asked them. We said we want to register 600,000 and for you small change because you all have the stolen money. Well, let me tell you, Dawie, within a week, these poor black people gave us 160,000 rand. And you say, I don't have support of black people. Where do you think? And I can tell you, these are 200 rands, 300 rands, even a 50 rand. I saw a person giving us 50 rand when they only had 70 rand. I don't have to tell you that I have support of black people. I speak for myself. Then there is the idea that the land is got no value. If it's got no value, why are you holding on to it?
Give it away. Give it to us. Give it.
I mean, if land has got no value, why don't you allow all of us to expropriate land without compensation? We almost have these degrees and we have this high technological, means of making profits. Give us the land. We want it, Jif. In fact, let me tell you, we want the land not because we want to do anything on it. I just want to wake up every morning and look at it. The middle class, the black middle class, UCT says the black middle class is somebody who earns like what, 6,000 rand. You're a black person, you own 6,000 rand, you're part of the black middle class. Let's stop jokes, eh? You say Zimbabwe people are going to die. But you don't know that the Zimbabwean maize production for this season has exceeded what they need, in the sense that they don't have to import maize from this season. So you're not following what's happening in Zimbabwe. Of course, it is still difficult. Of course, there's a crisis. Of course, any black person who touches the interests of white people will be made to pay. You killed Gaddafi. You think, why did you kill Gaddafi? It is because Gaddafi was saying, we disengage from the West. You killed Biko. You killed Sobukwe. You killed Chris Hani. So please, don't tell us. I mean, we can go on and on. But anyway, let me just conclude by saying there are white statistics and there are black stats. There's a white truth and there's a black truth. The white truth says South Africa is not a bad place. Only the past 10 years, Zuma messed up things. In fact, we have now our man. He will sort out these problems. That is the white truth. The black truth says, since 1652, we have been in hell. And that hell is created by you.
Gentlemen, we're going to do the Q&A now. Janine Meiberg will have the roving mic. I believe there's a question there. If you could just identify yourself and then ask the question.
All right. Thank you so much. My name is Sebastian Peterson, and I am the president of the African Progressive Movement. I thank the two speakers for really speaking on the issue of land. The problem that I have as a South African is that my comrade is saying there that he's representing black people. I don't represent black people, I represent South Africans. And everyone that lives in South Africa, has the right to own. Everyone in South Africa has the right to live. So if my comrades wants to talk about land expropriation, in fact, then we have to destroy Section 25, because Section 25 don't speak about land expropriation, it speaks about property. So the problem is this, the property that we have, sorry ma'am, I need to say this because you know the problem is this, the first time that you have a rumble, you had Julius Malema. The second time you also have the BLF. So I think it's about time that we also have to speak. Land expropriation is a myth that was created by the ANC, EFF, and now BLF. I was a member of the ANC for 20 years, and we've been fighting about this land expropriation, and even up to today, the Khoisan hasn't been given the right to speak about this thing. So let me just say this before I'm going to ask my question. South Africa belongs to all who lives in it. We, the people of South Africa, recognize the unjust of our past, honor those who suffered for justice and freedom in our land, respect those who work to build and develop our country, and believe that South Africa belongs to all, not only whites, not only blacks, but all who live in it, united in diversity. We therefore, through our freely elected representatives, adopt this. Our society is democratic based. If we're going to fight about land expropriation, leaders, we have to destroy our constitution. Our constitution speaks about democracy. We fought in apartheid for democracy. We got it now. And as the African Progressive Movement, we're saying that all South Africans has to have the freedom to live in this. I will plead to each and every one of you that's sitting here, stop fighting about land expropriation. South Africa don't need to fight about land. We want jobs. We want safety in our country. We want our education system to be stronger. And no one speaks about a black person, a white person, or Indian person, or colored person. We speak as South Africans. If we're not going to come to that point, we're going to fight. We don't want a bloodbath. My daughter is 8 years old. And if my daughter cannot be raised up in a country where she can be freed, then we have a problem. There's white children that don't know apartheid. There's black children that don't know apartheid. Let's stop this nonsense of black and whites, because we are all South African according to our constitution. Now my question is this to my chief comrade. If you're talking about land expropriation and you're talking about blood and you're talking about dying and all that kind of things, when are you going to speak to the people that really that own this land, which is the Khoi and the San? When are you going to start speaking to us? Because the problem is this: you come from the north and you want to talk about land that we own. We're saying, listen here, stop this nonsense. Stop this issue of land expropriation, because this is not a problem in this country. This is not a problem, my comrade. You know that. The problem is this: the reason why BLF and EFF can only talk about land expropriation is because there's nothing else that they can debate in this country. Our people don't need land. Our people need jobs. If we don't have an economy, we will have nothing. Let's build our economy. Let's stop fighting the whites. Let's stop fighting the farmers. Let's give land to everyone that can own it.
Thank you. I'm not sure that was a question. I think that was a very strong statement. So I think we'll move on to the next question, unless somebody would like to answer. Would you like to answer?
The interesting thing is that I and that brother spent the last 30 minutes talking to each other. He rejected the idea of the Khoi and the San as being separate from us when I was talking to him. He calls himself African. His organization says he's African because he rejects the Khoi and the San. He stands up in a room full of white people, and when he speaks, he goes back to precisely these divisions. Because, of course, white people could not have been able to enslave us and able to colonize us without people like him. He is there to wedge, and I'm sure he's also fundraising, to also say that we want jobs. Chief, do you know Didouan is just out here? Our people work on farms. That work is slavery. Our people work in mines. That work is slavery. We don't want your jobs. We want the land, and we want the mines, and we work for ourselves. Don't come here and sell us out again, Chief. After spending 30 minutes assuring me that you are with us on this battle. This is actually a shocking thing. Your children, just like my children, just like the children at UCT today, they are fighting for fees must fall. These children were not there under apartheid. They are being shot. They are being arrested in these universities because they have no access to education. These are black children. Why? Because white people have the economy. And where does that come from? It comes from land ownership. So, no, my brother, I can recognize you. I know you. I know you from 500 years ago when white people docked their ships here to come and enslave us. You are the one who helped them show where we were to get taken away.
May I say, I've explained the history of South Africa, where we came from, how things change over time. And every time there was one group that dominated another group. And there was a lot of bloodshed, unnecessary bloodshed. And exactly, in the end, what's going to happen, if you succeed in what you're trying to achieve, you will be the dominating group. And, of course, you will be on the receiving end if he becomes the dominating group. But I promise you, after you, there will be another dominating group, and they will dominate you again. This madness must stop, or we will never have a prosperous South Africa.
No, but that's fine. If you really hate domination, how come you haven't stopped it? How come you've allowed black people, the black majority, including the House Negro, to be oppressed 24 years after democracy? Why is it that 70% of top management is in the hands of white males? Why is it 80% of that? And you hate domination. I hate it too. But I don't say you're fighting it. Because you want us to accept the status quo. Because somehow there's a future in which you will be oppressors. No, my brother, we have never, no, I can't say my brother. No, say. We have never, black people incidentally, we have never oppressed anyone. We haven't. We fight amongst ourselves, we intermarry, we don't enslave. That is why if you go ask that brother, in fact, by the way, he told me, his family side on his father is Xhosa. That brother. He's not different from us. You and me are exactly the same people. So don't think that there's a difference between me and him. He's just playing you because he wants a bit of money from you.
Thank you. The next question.
What I can hear is that you're threatening him.
Okay.
No, this
Gentlemen,
Afriforum
could I have
problem.
your attention, please? Use a question.
No, but
Thank you.
he must not enter between me and my brother. Me and that brother can speak for himself. You don't speak for black people. You speak for the oppressor.
Okay, we've got another question.
My question is to Andile. So once you get the land back, hopefully you get it, how are you going to make sure that women are not excluded again in future? We have a problem in Africa where most of the land was owned by men. Women have no rights. And when you go apply in banks for business or anything in security, women still don't own. So can we please make sure that hopefully you get what you're looking for? You make sure that there's no exclusion of women in this economy.
No, I think it's a valid, important point. Absolutely. We have to make that commitment already now that land ownership and access cannot happen on the basis of gender discrimination. But let me just give you a quick example. You know, before white people arrived here, land rights rested with women in general. Go to the Nama people, the Makwa land. Land rights were vested to the women, with the women. White people arrived here and started giving men the permission to occupy. They changed and corrupted and created the kind of gender oppression on the land question which we see today. We have to correct that, and I accept the proposition. Now, we must agree amongst ourselves as black people that no one must be excluded, women in particular. In fact, you must say the first people to have this stronger rights to land must be women. There must be no question about that. But you see, my sister, that fight is between me and you there at home. Yeah, among these people, we must quickly make sure they give us land because we don't have land. We can't fight about something we don't have even amongst ourselves right now.
May I react to that?
Sure, go ahead.
Well, the land is not going to belong to men or women. It's going to belong to whoever the ruling class is at the moment. That's what who it's going to belong to. But let me make a comment about women. You know, there are many amazing economic breakthroughs. But one of the greatest economic breakthrough happened approximately 100 years ago. And then that happened when we started sending women, when it became compulsory to send girls to school. And that is the reason, that's a very important contributing reason why the world is as wealthy as it is today. And if you really want to empower women, start when it really matters and give them world-class skills development. It takes some time. But all economies, look at the Japanese, look at the Chinese, look at the Americans. The economies, those economies and countries that looked after their girl children and made sure they have proper qualifications, those are the economies that started growing very strongly.
Do we have another question? Any more questions? We've got a question here in the front. There we go.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Pelele Kumalo, a black man. I'm proud of black. I'm proud of black. In a country that is anti-black, in a world that is anti-black, in a system that hates black people. But to start, I'll first quote which says that Africanity is a set of characteristics that distinguish African thinking from Chinese thinking, from the Western thinking. I think when I came here first, I expected to come and see the president of BLF, which is speaking from the black face point of view, and someone who's speaking from the economic point of view as a chief economist. But when I came here, I saw someone who's just waffling around, speaking to defend the white perspective, which of today speaks. Whenever the president comes with something, he just say, oh, you say this, let me go this way. So today we are here to engage in this kind of island we are at with this room full of white people, the settlers, colonialists. But as we are here, we want to note this, ne? As white people, we want to note the land to us is not a commodity. The land to us represents who we are. When I go home in KZN, I don't just go home to those buildings who are there. I go home to a land that is owned by my ancestors, to a land that is owned by my grandmothers, my fathers, which the coming generations from me are going to own. So when you speak about the economy, we don't care, Chief. Us as black people, we come from a thing which says that if we have a burden, I have a burden myself in my life, I just remove it from me. I don't deal with the, how do I modify it to fix it, that it works better. I remove it. So the economy that as it stays, the status quo as it stays, is a burden to us. The capitalist economy is a burden to us. So ours, we'll never come here and speak about the economy, spend 4 hours. We're going to remove it. We are going to remove the economy of Jan Rupert, Nikki Oppenheimer, Joan Oppenheimer, and Ramaphosa, the young boy, Julius Malema, the young boy. We don't care. The economy, we don't care, but the land is ours. You see, we as black people, we'll never send you to the sea. Jesus made a compromise, but we love it. We'll never compromise, Chief. If you stay in South Africa, we are staying under conditions, but unlawful conditions because you stole the land. But if you stay here, if you stay in Kailicha, under our own conditions set by us, black people, that's how we are going to stay here. So for now, you can speak, do whatever you do. The war is coming. We are going to take back the land. The land is going to belong to us. Africa belongs to all Africans. Isolate.
Good evening. My name is Jeremy Wiley. And Comrade Andile and Dawie, thank you very much. I'm an African. I was born in Africa. My DNA is the same as your DNA. You cannot scientifically prove any different. The fact that I don't speak Zulu as well as you do is not a good reason to exclude me from South Africa. Just because I was born in Cape Town and not in Johannesburg doesn't give you a reason to exclude me from the future and my children, my grandchildren, and our grandchildren. So the question, I'm not getting emotional. I'm just giving you the facts. I can prove that I was born in Cape Town. I would just like to ask you, when the Imfakani took place in the Eastern Cape, almost 300 years ago, was there any benefit to the people of South Africa, or that region of South Africa? I don't think so. It was a burnt earth. Was there any advantage to South Africa in the Anglo-Boer War? Hundreds and thousands of people died and were left destitute. Is that the future that you see for South Africa? Because what you've been telling us tonight about the revolution that you're talking about is exactly that. It's a burnt earth. And everyone will suffer. All of us will suffer. Is that what you really want? Thank you.
One of the things, I think what will be useful is, and again, I think I'm asking the impossible. It doesn't seem to me that our white counterparts are able to understand what's going on in South Africa, at least in the lives of the black majority. You genuinely believe that things are not bad because your perspective is limited to your lives. So when you stand up and you say, Mfekane was horrible, your call for revolution is going to make things horrible, presupposes that things are okay. Things are not okay for black people. In Cape Town here, you would know, our people die from floods and fires in the townships. Now, that is not necessary. But it's a condition of our lives where a fire goes off, people die, because that's how we live in subhuman conditions. You drive, all of you, out to the airport. When you look on your left and your right, you can see how people live there. You can't see how people live there, right? We have internalized and naturalized the black conditions. So when we say our situation is bad, you think that I'm being facetious or difficult, or our situation is horrible. And from where we sit, things can only get better by destroying the system that perpetually excludes us. I grew up in a township in Potchefstroom. All of us in the morning go out with their bicycles to go to work for white people. Every single young person I know have worked for white people. To live, we have to work for you. So you think that is sustainable? It isn't. So don't bring Mfekani. White people have had their wars. And King Shaka, in fact, is not a murderer. King Shaka is a nation builder. That is why among the Zulu-speaking people is the biggest cohesive group. You don't call Otto von Bismarck a mass murderer, bloodthirsty, and so on. You say he's a nation builder. But African nation builders are bloodthirsty and so on. No, I'm just saying we move from really different perspective. I do not dispute that you have a similar idea. White people are our children. No, this is the point, right? Scientifically, you are our children. You left here, then you went there in the cold place. That's why you lost the melanin, right? Of course, some of you also got mixed up with funny creatures there. The point is, no, it is not a biological. I'm not arguing for biological determinism. I'm not arguing that white people are different from me. I'm arguing white people are oppressors. Our children came back with whips and they enslaved us. They returned and they colonized us and made us slaves in these countries, including South Africa. I speak English today because I'm colonized by my children, white people. You are not willing to give back. You are not willing to share. You're asking me to accept this as okay. I live in Langa. I'll die from hunger. I'll die. 20,000 black people die annually from murder in South Africa. From murder. Now you think that's not your problem. It is your problem. It is your creation. Because you have put us in subhuman condition where we kill each other to live. Who created the township? Who created the ghetto? You created it so that you can have security and we are subhuman. You don't want to take responsibility and then you want me to talk to you about our shared DNA. Yeah, I like us to, that if that shared DNA protected me against your oppression, I would think it means something. No, it means nothing. The divisions that we have between black and white are not the creation of black people. We are trying to solve a problem we did not create. But even today, as I speak with an educated white man, there's complete denial. There's arrogance. There's this belief somehow that I'm inherently inadequate. This is how the system has been perpetuated. We are saying there's a group of black people. It's not the first time. In the 70s, Steve Biko came with Black Power, and you saw what we did in Soweto. There's a group of young people again who are here. And we are willing to do the, and I mean this, we will go to the end to resolve this historical question.
I don't know what to react on, but what I can say as an economist, and this is my job, I analyze stuff when I look at numbers, and what I do know is that we have seen the last couple of years, the last 10 years especially, a massive increase in unemployment and poverty, and we have seen this for the reasons that I've mentioned, because of a destructive government. And the people that really suffered from that primarily were the poor people.
But the point I actually want to make here is that if we had an economy that was growing at 5%, we would have had much less unemployment and poverty and all those things. And we certainly would not have had this debate tonight. Because this is not a debate really about land, because it's a debate about poverty, and it's a debate about a lack of economic growth. That is the only way through which you can create wealth. Now, the Zimbabweans are 300 years ahead of us. I've heard. I wonder why most of them are here then.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Can I just quickly answer this and you'll talk?
It's a question. It's your turn, his turn. You have your turn. And it's not about white and black. It is about. Yeah. It is very difficult for anybody in this room. It is very difficult for anybody in this room to ask a question, because there's a lot of irrationality happening here. First and foremost, yeah, I give also the chance to laugh. First and foremost, black land first is only recognize black people, and it's excluding the rest of South Africa. Like we already made the point to you, but you see, it is making a point to you, asking a question to you. We already know that Daga is free. We are all South Africans that are born in this country. All of us has the right to be called South Africans. So my question to you is, why are you excluding the rest of South Africa? Why are you continuing with racial classification? Why are you continuing with apartheid? Why are you continuing identifying South Africans based on the color of their skin? And you can't hide from that fact, because you start off by saying black land first. We are all, and let me make this in 10 seconds, we are all South Africans in this room. We are all South Africans in this room. And we are rightful owners to our property. I've worked hard for my property. I paid for my property. My parents paid for their property. Business owners have sweat for their property. And you guys want to come and you want to steal, take, and rob people from what is rightfully theirs. And I want to echo, as I'm sitting down, I want to echo Mr. Roodt. Thank you, my good friend. I want to echo Mr. Roodt by putting this to you, black land first. That you are only looking to destroy this country. You are not speaking on behalf of the black people of South Africa. You are speaking on behalf of less than 0.5% of the South Africans or black people of this country. I thank you.
May I just start on Dr. Root's point on the economic development. You know, in the periods of, I think it's 2007, 2006 to, say, 2001, the economy was growing at about 6% under Mbeki. It was. He knows. 6%. But it was a jobless growth. Jobless growth. The economy grew. Unemployment was growing in tandem with this economy because this economy is not in our hands. So the idea that somehow the magical notion the economy will grow and then jobs will be created, we have been through that. 6%. Look at this white man, doesn't know this. But he's arrogantly shaking his head. He knows that the economy was growing at 6%. Under Mbeki, under Trevor Manuel, all of those guys, when they were running a proper neo-colonial, neo-classical economics, under growth, gear. He knows that. But the point is, there were not jobs. The economy was growing for you. You made the money. The black majority didn't. So the idea that the economy will grow for you, not for us. You have to redistribute this economy before you can talk about this. I don't think we must respond to that, brother. No, comrades. That brother, don't worry. You are black like us. You are African like us. And maybe it's good that you must make your pitch to white people that somehow, no black person has got property. We work hard. My father worked, the hardest person I've known. 3 a.m. every day was waking up to work for white people.
Thank you.
Did he have property? No. So so brother, I understand you. And I hope some white people will give you some business deals. Black people, let me just conclude by saying, black people have been put in the condition where our engagement are unethical because we have to somehow project that which is not true. It is too costly to speak the black truth, and therefore we understand.
Can I help you out? There are two very important publications. The one is the South African Reserve Bank's quarterly bulletin. It's published, quarter. There's a lot of numbers in it. You will find it. There's a lot of numbers. There's some writing in front, some pictures and stuff, but plenty of numbers at the back. There's another website called stats.gov.za. There's also a lot of numbers there. If you go and look at those numbers, just go and look at those numbers, you will find that what you've just said about job creation is just absolute nonsense. It is just nonsense. So I cannot, how can I debate with somebody that's got the facts wrong? It's just not true. We created jobs when the economy was growing. When we destroyed the jobs, when we got a destructive government that forced this economy into recession, that's how we're destroying jobs. Go and have a look at the numbers. You don't have the right to create your own official numbers.
Next question, ladies and gentlemen.
But he has no right to lie, this man. He knows that the economy was growing at 6%, and official unemployment even was hitting, about 40%. At the time the economy was growing at 6%. He knows it, but you see, he is a liar because he's a land thief. This is the problem.
Andile,
okay, we don't agree with these statistics. We've got the next question.
Hi, Comrade Andile. My question comes in 3 parts to you. So basically, what I'm asking is, you call yourself comrade, and assuming that that's part of a communist understanding, and you talk about the Chinese idea of property. The Chinese idea of property is that all property is owned by the state and rented for 60 years by individuals. So is your conception of property rights the same as the Chinese conception, that you won't individually own the property, that you have no individual property rights, that the property is owned by the state and you rent the property? And then my last question is, you said that your conception of the state was different. What is your conception of the state? How do you understand the state? My question just comes from a place of wanting to better understand your movement.
Okay. Yes, no, thank you. Must I respond?
Carry on.
Yes. No, thanks for the question. Indeed, we support the Chinese model as far as radical land redistribution is concerned, but we will not accept the proposition that the land must be owned by the state, not the state. The land must the land belongs to the people, right? So the model of tenure arrangement must be such that direct ownership goes to the people and the state protects that ownership, not the state. I mean, I can't imagine a situation where the state is run by Julius Malema or the DA, and then they must become my landlord. No, we don't accept that. The Chinese were able to do so because of the revolutionary state. This is not a revolutionary state. These guys, if we were to give them this land, they will literally the following day, they'll sell it off. So we don't accept that. So firstly, we accept radical redistribution, but land must not become a commodity. In other words, decommodified land. But ownership must be secured to the people, and the state must respect that arrangement. Then my conception of the state is a Marxist conception.
Can you just let the speaker finish, please?
And that is simply that the state is the executive committee of the ruling class. And who is the ruling class in the South African context? It's white monopoly capital by virtue of its ownership of the means of production. That is why in my example, and none of these people under corruption or claim to be against corruption can dispute the fact that the Oppenheimers, because of the power they have emanating from property ownership, they can basically do as they wish. Not the courts, not the government, not this parliament, because they are the real ruling class. No law will be made against the ruling class. So the state is not this fake agreement that somehow there's a countervailing force here which take care of all our interests. No. The states have particular interests, and those interests are the interests of the ruling class. And the ANC is not the ruling class. It is only the ruling party. And I think that distinction everybody will understand, basically.
Okay, thank you. The next question?
Dawie Roodt, I think. Dawie, would you like to reply?
Yeah, I don't want to answer on behalf of him, but if I may add something that I think is quite interesting. And that is that we know all these ideologies about, new liberalism and capitalism and communism and all that sort of stuff. But I've studied communism, so and it is really an interesting ideology. And there's a major difference in communism. There are a number of schools inside what we call the broader school of communism. Now, there are two major schools of thought within communism. The one is Marxism, and the other one is Leninism. And there are major differences between the two. In the case of Marxism, Marx believed that the power should be with the people. And that's where the word Soviet comes from. It means local authority. You get as close as possible to the people. That is the idea of Marx. Lenin said, Vladimir Ilyanov, to use his correct original word, he said no, and there's an essay that he wrote called What Is to Be Done. Go and read it, it's quite interesting. And Lenin said, essentially, it comes down to the following. People are stupid. You cannot trust people. You have to centralize power, and you have to teach people about economics and politics. And only after you've indoctrinated, based on what you believe in, can you give the power back to the people. So that is what Leninism essentially is. Most communist regimes in the world are Leninist regimes, and not a single one have ever given the power back. You are a Leninist.
Thank you. Next question.
No, I am a proud Leninist. I am absolutely a proud Leninist. But you see, a disciple of capitalism cannot provide an honest exposition of the Marxist discourse. Lenin is the best student of Marx. In fact, Lenin, all he did was to implement the Marxist project. Marx never made a revolution. Lenin did. And Lenin, in fact, has created the Russia today, which is able to compete. Of course, I mean, Russia today is, in fact, if we want some protection against Donald Trump and American imperialism, you have to have some dealings with Russia and China. Because they have been able to build states which protect their interests. Today, I've just seen, okay, let's not go there. But the point is, I'm a proud Leninist, and therefore the state must be used in the interest of the people, but that requires a revolutionary change. I mean, that man, for instance, their articulation, Lenin will have to help them. They need revolutionary consciousness. They don't have it. Because the ruling ideas in any society are the ideas of the ruling class. The ruling class have told black people, it's okay to stay in Khayelitsha and you guys can stay well wherever you are. You have normalized this from the education, from church, from the media. So as revolutionaries and Leninists are teaching our people that it is not normal that we should live the way we are. And you say that is bad. No, it's not bad. It is bringing people to consciousness, and we're going to help those brothers to come to consciousness as well.
Next question.
Hi, Andile. Hello. I'm Thomas. I think after tonight, I'm also starting to wonder whether I can understand your perspective, but I'm going to try anyway. Why not? I think that the argument that you brought forth is premised upon the fact that injustice is, in a sense, some kind of zero-sum game. That you can reverse injustice just by simply pulling back whatever that injustice was. In my admittedly unwarranted opinion, that's not how I found the world to work. I think that injustice perpetuates more injustice. And what I'd like you to clarify in terms of your worldview is whether you believe that injustice, particularly in terms of South African society, can be solved. Whether it's something that we can eliminate, or whether we have compelling reasons as to why we would live with a different form of injustice. I want you to dig down into the reasons for that trade-off, if you would. Thank you.
What I find interesting is that you did not burden yourself with providing a perspective of what you mean by your version of justice. Right? So you say, look, what you, Andile Mngxitama, is proposing is a zero-sum game and is bad. Right? But you're not telling me what is this other form of justice which is sustainable, acceptable, ethical. And we have limited ourselves to the land question, which is a finite question, isn't it? You're going to take land from somebody, give it to someone else. There's no machine that produces land. I have not burdened myself with what is the place of white people in this project. I am burdening myself with the position of black people. And I'm making the historical claim to land, and I'm also making some concession to the economic question. So, but if you're not starting from saying, I accept there's an injustice, you don't, so there's a difficulty there. Because you want me to accept the status quo. I'm simply saying I cannot accept the status quo. But what I'm proposing is black people being first, whereas right now they are last. First for us does not mean oppressing you. We'll create a just system where white people will live here or leave South Africa under conditions set by the black majority. So, but I'm very interested to engage you on this question, because I'm saying what we want right now is addressing the historical injustice. Now you call that another injustice. I don't know if that follows. I think that you have to think a little more about what you are proposing, because you are not helping us. In fact, you are justifying the status quo, and I don't want to suggest that's what you really want to do. You want an answer, but the answer is not acceptable to you, which you are providing. But it's acceptable to us because we're the direct victims of the status quo.
No, we are.
Thanks.
Yeah? We've got next question.
Yeah, in fact, that was probably the best response you've given tonight, besides your 20-minute talk. So I think we must all be careful not to trivialize what is ultimately going to be something that's going to potentially impact the country. So on one level, I agree quite wholeheartedly with a lot of the sentiments that you shared, with some disagreements in terms of your drawn-down conclusion. I think the drawn-down conclusion does muddy a lot of the context that you bring in terms of your argument. I think some of the key things that you've mentioned is obviously the fact that, there is real challenges faced by black South Africans that I think a lot more white people need to be cognizant of. And you made very valid examples around the situations that have happened in places like Khayelitsha, which is abhorrent and totally unnecessary in a country like ours with the kind of wealth that we have. But I think where we draw down a conclusion that leads to, again, a context of human sacrifice that, again, obliterates everything as we stand for, that's when we begin to start maybe imagining a future that, again, is a little bit anarchist as opposed to progressive. So for me, what I want, hopefully, everybody to go home with tonight is a better understanding, and that's why I loved your response to this last question, because I think it was very clear, and it didn't kind of take the conversation to a place where it didn't need to go. What I wanted to give you an opportunity just to ask a question around is, next year is an election, okay? Part of that process is a 5-year mandate. What is the Land First, Black First, Land First agenda related to the 5-year context, how it would compete in the context of the politics of the country? Because ultimately, a lot of these decisions are based on what happens with the political climate in the rest of the country. So that's a question I want to ask you, Andile. For you, Dawie, I think, again, we must be careful not to, again, be kind of obfuscating the context of true, relevant context around the black condition. So be very careful around how you trivialize the black reality in this country. It's a mistake a lot of white people make in South Africa. And it's a mistake that, again, Andile said a lot of factual things. Don't say that wrong. That's the perspective we have. Every day we live in the black skin that we live in, and every day we make a way to survive in a country that's, again, supposedly meant to both be politically and numerically and analytically inclusive. But we don't feel that. Again, primarily because far too many people don't take the context of that black reality to heart. So my question to you, again, in the context of progressiveness, okay, what is it that needs to change practically over the course of the next 5 years, regardless of who gets a mandate of next year's election, that, again, from an economic perspective, that needs to drive a broader, more inclusive economy that, again, brings young black South Africans well into the mainstream of the economy, okay, and begins to start shifting the reality away from some of the positions that are very hardcore that Andile is taking? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dawie, shall I start with you?
Thank you very much for that. I think it's absolutely an excellent comments that you've made, and a valuable question as well. So, and I absolutely agree with you. I think there are many white people that do not understand what the things that you have referred to. But with that, I can also add there are many rich people that do not understand what poor people are going through. It's not necessarily a racial thing, but certainly there are aspects of that. So I absolutely agree with you. And don't think for one single moment I haven't experienced this. Of course, I'm not as poor as people as there are so many poor people all over the big cities in South Africa. But I can promise you, as an economist that's been analyzing the South African economy for many, many years, what I really want in South Africa to see when I look at those numbers every year, or every month, when I get the poverty numbers and unemployment numbers, I want that to go down. That I know. I want that to go down. And I want all South Africans to benefit. I promise you, that is what I really feel hard. How to achieve that? And there really is only one solution to this. And that is somehow we need to get this economy to grow. And probably the best and the most important place, and I can give you all sort of ideological stuff, and I've done it tonight. Talk about things like private property rights and privatization and that sort of nonsense. And of course you need those sort of things. But if you really want to take this country forward, the first thing that we need to do, we somehow must trust each other. Somehow we must work together. And somehow we must have this wish and this dream of making South Africa a better place. And if we keep on attacking each other, and if we keep on taking away the rights of other people, and keep on looking down at other people, all of us, whites and blacks and rich and poor people, all of that, then we will not make progress in this amazing country, and we will not reduce unemployment and poverty and all of that. And that's the answer, I guess, is for us to talk to each other and to have a single vision of a successful South Africa.
Is it Dr. Dawie Roodt? I want to trust you. I want to trust you. I want to trust white people. You see, yourself, you are unable to give the basis for the trust. Because the historical question have not been addressed. So your hope for trust is based on reconciliation without justice. You drop the idea of justice and want us to reconcile somehow, to forget the lives that white and black live, which are radically different precisely because of the historical question of injustice. I want to trust you. But what is the basis for that? I did not have the basis to trust you.
Because white people in this country, they have security, they live well, and this is on account of the exclusion of black people. So you can't call for, let's work together, without addressing the thing that caused the division. It is dishonest. It is white colonial thinking. And that is what we are rejecting. Therefore, the position that we hold as Black First, Land First is the most ethical. Address the historical justice to create the basis for trust. You say, don't do that. Black people, let us just be happy together. Forget about that thing. It's not going to happen. I'm absolutely conscious of the proposition that BLF is making. Our disruptive move is conscious completely. We understand the dialectical moment and the dialectical tension which is necessary to move history ahead. Without the confrontation between this white monster and this black exclusion, there is no possibility for change in this country. We are sacrificing ourselves, therefore, for the possibility that, in fact, in the tomorrow, after the destruction of the system as it stands today, there will be a better society. This is a major, I could get a job and I don't care about this revolution. I want to become a poet, man. I want to write love poetry. How do I do that? When I go home every day and I see the condition of the black people, how do I love? How do I actualize myself as a human being under these conditions of our people? You're asking for too much from us. In fact, we have nothing to give anymore. You have everything, we have nothing. It's a stalemate. But I understand I can't ask you to give. Because if I were in your position, probably I will not give either. So my brother, I am absolutely aware of Steve Biko's teaching. In South Africa, what is the problem? White racism. What is the antithesis to the thesis? Black solidarity. And only at this point of the dialectical engagement, we'll have a synthesis, which will be a possibility of a different life. But at this point, I've not seen the dialectical. So that fire must come, my brother, because, as good Christians, we know, Matthew 3 verse 11, Jesus Christ, John says, I baptize with water. The one who comes after me will bring fire. We need the things in fire right now, because this conversation here, I don't think will, no, will not ban you. You are a black person, chief. What? No. This conversation for me, it is precisely what is necessary in South Africa. We need to end the conversation in order to confront the devilish reality of the black majority. And again, I'm saying this, Chairperson. Unfortunately, I don't believe white people can see it. This is the difficulty I have. So we feel like we're shouting at each other. And I do not have the confidence to believe that white people, even conceptually, have the capacity to understand why things have to change, and they have to change radically. I don't believe that. Do you think we hate white people because you're just white? No, that's not the point. The problem is in South Africa, whiteness is synonymous with wealth, comfort. Blackness, on the other hand, is synonymous with all these troubles that we're going through. I don't have to tell you about what is going in our hospitals, in our schools. I don't have to tell you about all these things that are bad for black people, and you guys have a different life. No. We don't hate you because you're just white. The problem is whiteness is power which excludes and is predatory on blackness.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We've got the last question.
Hi, thank you both for the different perspectives you brought. I think on both parts, I've learned personally a lot. I think an issue like land expropriation is one the common man on the road in the workplace doesn't fully understand, and we don't understand what that's going to look like for us. And so we speak from and act from a position of fear. I have a question which is going to maybe pull a little bit apart from where you've both been coming, because the night has had points of feeling quite racially charged, applause on certain speakers' points without the other, and I just want to say from my point of view, you've both brought points that are worth noting. And even in that you've both brought points that are worth noting, there has also been disrespect on both sides, which I find offensive as a black person, to say that there are reports that can be read that have numbers and pictures, because you might not understand the numbers. I analyze numbers for a living. Black people can understand numbers. But also on the other side, there is an assumption or a view that, you know, all white people are racist and we're coming for the land and all of that. And I can understand the viewpoint, and I respectfully disagree. The reason I respectfully disagree is I'm married within a mixed race marriage, and you might not respect that, but I can speak to the fact that not every white person has the view, and I understand what it's like to be condescended by a white person and to be spoken to like you're stupid, you're only going to get the pictures in the report. I get that. But I can tell you that I have seen a world with white people who understand their white privilege and understand that the world, this country we live in, needs to make changes that are going to address the terrible past we've had that has neglected people of color, not black people or people of color. That said, my question is, and I hope it's maybe not too philosophical or too left for you, on both your sides, is there a future that you can see and envision that looks like something peaceful? I completely saw on Andile's side, Boot Andile, I completely hear and know that there is rectification that must happen, 100%, and I agree with that. And I completely understand that there's an economy that needs to progress so that we can reduce unemployment. That is vital. But what I want to ask is, as people who are sitting on racially opposite sides, is there a future in which my biracial children have a place in South Africa? Is there a place that you can see us in a place that is positive? Because at the moment, both are saying the opposing person's views are going to be detrimental. Is there a view you have or a hope you have of a place where we can see a South Africa that benefits many races?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Firstly, my sister, I don't know if conceptually we call your children, is it biracial? Your children will be treated in the world as black children. And if they go to America, if they are boy children, they will be shot at with no question being asked. So your children are not safe in the world which is anti-black. So we're not talking about, you know, I mean, I used to have white friends, by the way, myself. The race question is not, we must never reduce it to individual experiences. We talk about the systemic. You know, my friend, one of my white friends was actually a white hobo. And he would make fun of me, and I used to try to dress a little bit better than now. And he'll make a test here in Cape Town. He'll say to me, we're going to go to this club. I'm going to go in. And this man was a proper hobo. They will allow him in. And then I come there, they stop me. And they laugh at me and say, you see, because we're not dealing here with white. There are, I'm sure, good individual white people. I'm sure they're there. In the same way that there are lots of very good black people. That's not the problem. The problem is a systemic one. So please, if your immediate partner is a nice person, understands, do not represent that reality as the reality of the black majority who systematically every day have to meet this problem of whiteness. So I just wanted to clarify that. It's sad because you asked me to imagine a better world.
I want it myself. I don't want this world. You know, like today, just today, for instance, let me tell you, my cousin then KwaZulu Natal, she tells the story of having gone to 3 clinics looking for ARVs. Somebody's laughing. If one of your family members are reliant on ARVs, go to this place, go to that place, go to that place, there are no ARVs. Because your government is scared to bring the generics. Because it has to satisfy the pharmaceutical industry. Again, there's always the link with white capital. Oh, white capital is bribing all of them. So I'm just saying, my sister, the reason Black First, Land First is fighting and prepared to do the things that we do, it is because we want precisely that life. And you know what? We know it is not impossible. If you think a little bit, not like a capitalist, if you think a little bit like a black person, all of us want a little bit of security. I need to know that I'm going to have a house, my children have good education, when I'm sick I'll go to a good hospital, and all these basic things. These basic things are not available to us, and this is exclusion by a system. So unfortunately, we're going to go against that system. It's a brutal system. It destroys us. Many of my comrades are going to court for years and years. 2 years, some of us have been going to courts. Young black students at these universities have criminal records for struggling for free education. Ask Dawie here. Is free education something that must happen? No, it is too expensive. The state cannot afford that. Everywhere in Sweden, and that person is right, Sweden, everywhere else, including this, I mean, there's this guy there, this guy, soccer player, is just giving him Sierra Leone. No, my sister, we want change. We want a good life. Me, I really want a good life. I want to read philosophy. I feel very bad. I've not done all my Western classics. How can I do Western classics when Dawie Roodt here is telling me about apartheid historiography that says that we're all colonialists, the first group arrived, the other one is here, and another. When all we need to say is simply, guys, 1652 you arrived here, you did very bad things. They benefited you. Even Mandela, white people, you did not vote for him, his party when he was there. You created another party. Mandela, Nelson Mandela. Me, I can't trust white people. I have no basis whatsoever to trust white people, but I want a good life for the future of my children, their children, and your children. White people already have the future. That's the big difference.
Thank you, ma'am, for your question. I think my reference to numbers is simply that there are so many people in South Africa, everywhere, all over South Africa, that make statements without actually going to check the facts. That's my only. But your philosophical question, what's the future going to look like? And I think that's an excellent question. And this is what I think the future is going to look like. What we've seen, especially in the past, especially since after the Second World War, the initial idea was the individual was the center of the universe, and everything was built around the individual. Human rights, private property protection, that sort of stuff. Now, gradually that has changed over years. And today we have governments globally that's the biggest there's ever been, central banks that are hugely powerful, debt burdens that's the highest, and tax burdens the highest it's ever been. And I can promise you this cannot go on. But the point I want to make is I'm talking about the global part, from a global perspective, we have a new ruling class in a way, and they are the career bureaucrats and the career politicians and the career ineptocrats, they are so powerful. We have a new ruling class. And I think the world is gradually moving away from that. So that is just a comment I want to make. The second comment I want to make is if you look at the nature of all economies start off with the so-called dirty industries. The dirty industries are typically agriculture and mining, and from there on you move to the secondary industries, which are typically manufacturing, and from there you move to the tertiary industries, and that is typically service kind of things. And if you look at the modern economies, or the more modern economies are, the bigger the tertiary part of that economy is, the service part of the economy. And things like, for example, the primary industries, mining and so on, are really not that important anymore. Look, even in countries like South Africa. And gradually the secondary part of the economy, the manufacturing industry, typically also becomes smaller and smaller, And a really important part of the economy is the service industry. But the interesting thing, and this is what I think the future is going to look like, the service industry or the tertiary industry, and is also that industry that can, to a large extent, be digitized. And you all are part of that industry. You all belong to a Facebook group, you all have a cell phone, you all download music, and you get all that sort of stuff. That is the future. But the amazing thing about this future is that the power, which is currently with central governments and with all these ineptocrats and bureaucrats, because of this new technology, the power is going to move where it's supposed to be. And that's in your hands and in my hands. And I promise you, we've made amazing progress the past 100 years. The progress that we're going to make the next 100 years is going to be even greater. And it is because of things like technology. And the only thing that you need to do is to make sure that you're part of this party. And your responsibility is to make sure your kids are prepared to participate in this new thing called the modern economy. And the next 100 years is going to be absolutely amazing.
Thank you very much. Andile and Dawie, thank you so much. Okay, if you haven't changed in some way, you've been sleeping. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Denise, thank you so much for organizing this evening. Is there coffee or... Oh, there is coffee. So if you'd like to stay around, there is still coffee that will be served. Ladies and gentlemen, to our speakers, thank you so much. It's been really a most enlightening evening. And thank you so much for attending. And if you need tickets for the parking, you can just get them from Denise, who's in the back. Thank you so much and good night.